When the American colonies broke away from Britain, they faced a problem that had no clear historical solution at their scale. How do independent political communities remain free, yet form a stable union? In searching for models, many American thinkers turned to classical history, Enlightenment philosophy, and the Bible. One of the most influential biblical frameworks they drew on was the story of Mount Sinai. At Sinai, the biblical narrative describes 12 tribes emerging from slavery in Egypt and entering into a shared covenant. They do not lose their identity as separate tribes, but they agree to a common law that binds them into a single political community. For some thinkers in the founding era, this looked strikingly similar to the American situation. 13 independent states trying to form a functioning union. Several key founders and influential figures used ancient Israel explicitly as a political analogy. John Adams argued in A Defense of the Constitutions of Government of the United States that the Hebrew nation could be studied as a form of republic. He treated ancient Israel as an example of a society governed by law rather than arbitrary monarchy. James Wilson, one of the principal architects of American constitutional theory and later a Supreme Court justice, described early Hebrew governance as a system where law stands above rulers. For Wilson, this demonstrated that legitimate political authority could exist without kings, grounded instead in legal structure and consent. Samuel Langdon, a Harvard president and influential preacher during the Revolutionary era, went even further. In a famous 1788 sermon, he explicitly described the Republic of the Israelites as a model for the American states, comparing the tribes of Israel to the individual states in the new Union. Even Jonathan Mayhew, an earlier revolutionary preacher whose ideas influenced the founding generation, developed the idea of covenant-based governance. He emphasized that biblical covenant language, especially the idea of collective agreement, resembled political consent among free people.
We must stand together for our rights and conscience.
In these interpretations, Mount Sinai became more than a religious story. It became a political metaphor for how a diverse population could voluntarily bind itself into a unified legal order. The comparison also helped address one of the central fears of the founding period: disunion. Under the weak Articles of Confederation, states often acted like separate nations. Trade disputes, weak central authority, and political instability led many founders to believe the Union was fragile. In this context, the Sinai narrative offered a useful frame. It suggested that freedom and law were not opposites. Instead, freedom could be preserved precisely through a shared constitutional structure that held diverse communities together. Importantly, this was not a literal attempt to recreate ancient Israel in America. The founders were not building a theocracy. Rather, they were using biblical history as a language for political reasoning in a culture where the Bible was widely read as both moral text and historical record. In the end, Mount Sinai functioned as a metaphor, a story of how separate groups can become one political body through shared law and consent. The American Constitution was not written at Sinai, but for some of its interpreters, Sinai helped explain what they were trying to accomplish: a durable union of distinct political communities under a common legal framework.